So let's continue our demo with the new project. So we have here, let's call it my web TB. Okay, I just chose empty project so that I could add my own pages. So I'll add web form. So I call this one web form as index. Alright, so the page has been created. So here, our objective is to show the data stored from the database. Student, specifically from the table profile. So before we'll do the connection to the database, let us fill in first some sample data just to show our demo would really work. Alright, so sample we have alright, so I guess okay na eh. So we have three data here. You have Alendana, MyCheck, and Nakuratan. So let's go back to our page again. Now first and foremost, before you could connect the database, you need to import the necessary classes that you're going to use. So here we are going to need system.data and system.data.scale client. So import namespace is equal to system data. Then we'll just copy it. Then we need data.scale client. Alright, so if you now have your data, then let's now create the connection. So first we are going to declare variables for a scale connection, scale command, and the data repeater. So we have here my connection as SQL connection. My command as SQL command, and my data repeater, data reader as SQL data reader. Alright, so first, my connection will be used to connect to the database, specify the connection string, what database to connect, what specific database, what kind of server, what's the name of the server, and then my command here will be used to accept the different SQL statements that we are going to execute. Then data reader will be the one to accept the result, whatever is the query created for my command. Alright, so let's create first the connection. We have my connection is equal to new scale connection. So the parameters that we will need is first the server name. So we have server equals localhost because our database resides here in our PC. So if, for example, you're going to connect to a certain server, SQL server, within your network, so you just change localhost with the IP address of that specific computer. Okay, the next parameter is database. So our database is student. And then the ID, user ID. So here I have set it to SA. Now, to set this UID and password, you have the chance to create it during the installation, or you could manually add the account in your SQL server. So here password equals review now. Alright, so those are the needed arguments for our connection string. We have the server, database, UID, and password. So assuming we were able to establish connection, so we are now going to call the function open. This function will then try to connect to the database and then check whether the specified parameters are correct. So to check whether we were able or we have successfully connected to our database, so we just need to check if my connection that state equal to 0, meaning if my connection we're not able to connect, then we're going to call again my connection.open to make sure that it will let us connect to the database. Alright. So after establishing the connection, let's now proceed to my command. So again, my command will be used to accept whatever the SQL statement or the query that we are going to use. So in this case, we are going to have the select statement. We're going to select all the fields for TBL profile and then display them later. So the statement would be select asterisk from TBL profile. Alright. Then the second parameter needed here is the connection, of which we have set it to my connection. So after stating the command, the query, so my data reader now will then accept whatever is the value returned for that specific query. Alright. So we can now assume that the data are now stored in my data reader. So all we need to do now is to create a table. So we'll just remove these statements. We'll just create a simple table. This will then be used to display the data. So a table with 2 rows. So the first row will be the header of the table. So since we have 4 fields including the student ID, so we'll only need 3. Later na natin include si primary key. So we have here first name, we have last name, we have allowance. And then on the second row will be the counterpart for this header, the different data that we are going to insert. Now, this second row should be under a loop so that we would be able to show the data. So we may have the loop statement here. So we have here while my data reader that read. And then here is the closing and while. Okay, so we have the while here and then the end while after the end of the row. So in between, we are going to display the data. So here for the first name, we'll have my data reader that item, then first name, then display it. So we have response, that's right. Then the same thing that we'll do with allowance and last name. We have L name and this would be allowance. Alright, so let's try to execute this statement. Okay, so we have successfully retrieved the data from the database. So all you need to do is to apply some CSS to make your table look better. So after every open of the connection, so make sure you have to close it. So here we'll just add my data reader that close and my connection that close. So let's try it again. Okay, so I guess that's it for this first part of our demo, in which is retrieving data from the database. Thank you.